The girl in the alley rain slammed into the broken pavement like tiny fists, washing garbage into the gutters of Lower Dells City. It was midnight, and no one sane was outside. Not in this district, not in that weather. Arthur Langley wasn't sane. He never claimed to be. His coat was 3 decades old, soaked and heavy with rain. His boots leaked, his knees ached. He coughed into his sleeve as he made his slow way home, clutching a tattered grocery bag with a half loaf of bread and a tin of soup. That was dinner. Again. He was just about to cut across the alley behind Juno Street when he stopped. There was a sound, faint, like whimpering. Arthur squinted into the shadows. Steam rose from a cracked vent. Trash bins overflowed. Something shifted behind them. Something alive. He should have kept walking. He did in singled quotes too. Instead, he stepped closer, heart thumping with that old instinct, the one he thought he'd buried when he lost his daughter on Mars 15 years ago, and then he saw her, a child, maybe 10, no younger, curled behind the dumpster, knees drawn to her chest, skin pale, no, not pale, glowing faintly under the grime and bruises. Her hair was silver, tangled, her face streaked with dirt and blood. Her eyes opened. They were violet. Alien. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Arthur spoke first. "Hey, you all right, kid?" She flinched, tried to crawl back, but there was nowhere to go. She was trembling violently, ribs poking through her skin like she hadn't eaten in weeks. He crouched slowly, ignoring the scream in his knees. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said gently, voice rasped from age and too many cigarettes. "I swear." The girl opened her mouth, but no words came. Her lips were cracked. She stared at him like an animal, unsure whether to trust or bite. Arthur sighed. He reached into his grocery bag, pulled out the loaf of bread, and tore off a piece, held it out. The girl stared. Her fingers twitched, then lightning fast. She snatched it and shoved it into her mouth like she hadn't seen food in days. Maybe she hadn't. Arthur's heart clenched. What the hell had happened to her? 15 minutes later, she was wrapped in his old coat, seated awkwardly on a torn armchair in his tiny, cluttered apartment on level 6 of Eldritch Tower, one of the last government-subsidized buildings still standing in Lower Dells. Arthur made soup, canned, bland, but hot. She devoured it. She didn't speak. She didn't ask where she was. She didn't even flinch when the rain outside turned to hail and pounded the windows. She just watched him. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Arthur tried to act normal, didn't ask too many questions. He gave her a blanket, turned on the heater, turned off the news. The broadcast was talking about some meteorological anomaly near the coast, storms forming out of nowhere. He didn't care. His focus was on her. It wasn't until hours later, after she fell asleep, curled on the couch like a kitten, that he saw the patterns, glowing, shifting, faint as mist. They pulsed under her, skin like constellations moving in real time, like a galaxy was trapped beneath her surface. Arthur's mouth went dry. This wasn't some sick child. This wasn't even a child in the human sense. She was something else, something incredible. He sat back, heart pounding. What the hell had he brought into his home? And why did it feel like the most human thing he'd done in years? Next morning, the girl still hadn't spoken, but she didn't look as terrified. She pointed at objects around the room, lamp, chair, cup, and Arthur gave her their names. She repeated some in a soft, breathy voice. Her accent was ... wrong, unnatural, like someone trying to mimic sound instead of understanding it. Arthur didn't care. He went out briefly, grabbed more food, some clothes from the thrift store. When he returned, she was gone. Panic hit him like a freight train. He dropped the bags, called out, tore through the apartment. Nothing. Then he saw it. The bathroom door, slightly ajar. He pushed it open. She sat on the tile floor, fully clothed, water still running from the sink. She was staring at her reflection in the mirror, touching her face like it didn't belong to her. When she saw him, she didn't run. She just whispered, "Why, this," and pointed to her eyes. Her voice, it was hollow, like she'd only recently learned how to use it. Arthur knelt beside her. "Because they're yours," he said. She frowned. "They, took others, who they burned." Arthur's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a random alien child. Something bad had happened. Something she barely remembered or couldn't say. But someone, somewhere, was looking for her, and probably not to help. That night, Arthur didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, shotgun on his lap, listening to the wind and wondering what kind of storm he had just stepped into. Around 2 a.m., she woke up screaming. He rushed to her. She clutched his arm, tears glowing on her cheeks. "They're coming," she whispered. "They know." Arthur tried to calm her, but her body was hot, burning with light. Her skin shimmered like stars. The room flickered, and then just as fast it stopped. The light vanished. She collapsed into his arms. The next day, Arthur made a decision. He called in an old favor. He reached out to a friend from the war. Not just any war, but the Titan border conflict, where the government had hidden all sorts of shady alien tech. A man named Mason Reese, now a recluse and conspiracy nut. Reese listened without interrupting. When Arthur finished, there was a long silence. Then, "I think you need to come see me. And bring her." "Why?" "Because she's not just alien, Arthur. She's not even from this galaxy." Arthur gripped the phone tighter. "You know what she is." "No. But I know who's looking for her. And if she's talking about them coming, you better run." Arthur looked at the girl, asleep on the couch, curled in his coat. "Yeah," he muttered. "We'll be there." Outside, a surveillance drone hovered silently above the window, its lens pulsing red. It zoomed in on the girl's glowing hand as she shifted in her sleep. Data uploaded. Signal sent. Target confirmed. She wasn't supposed to survive. 3 days had passed since Arthur brought the girl home. 3 days since she first spoke. 3 days since she said, "They're coming." Now, everything in Arthur Langley's world was shifting. The television news had gone quiet on the storm front, reporting only atmospheric interference. But Arthur had lived through enough real-world cover-ups to know when something stank. Wasn't paranoid, he'd just been right too many times. And this girl, this alien child, was the biggest truth the world had tried to bury. He glanced at her across the diner table. She sat stiffly in the corner booth, dressed in mismatched, human clothes that sagged on her frame. A faded hoodie, jeans rolled up at the ankles, hair brushed but still tangled. She held a spoon awkwardly, poking at the bowl of oatmeal in front of her like she was still figuring out the concept of food. He could tell she was trying. She wanted to belong, but she didn't know how. Neither did he, really. Mason Reese's compound was 2 hours north, deep in the deadlands beyond the last public transit hub. Arthur hadn't driven in years, but he rented a solar bug from an old friend who owed him, and didn't ask questions. As they rode in silence, the girl occasionally whispered things under her breath. Words that didn't sound like language at all, more like frequency, resonance, like her voice was tuning into something just out of reach. Arthur tried not to show how uneasy it made him. Instead, he asked, "Do you remember your name?" She blinked, looked at him. "Name? Yeah. What do they call you?" "Your people." A pause. Then she said, softly, "Lixa." Arthur nodded. "Lixa, that's pretty." She tilted her head. "Is it mine?" "It is now." She smiled. Just barely. It was the first real expression he'd seen on her face. When they reached Mason's place, the gate didn't open at first. Arthur had to wave the old military dog tag through the rusted scanner twice before the buzzing doors creaked. Apart, Mason was waiting on the porch, rifle in hand, silver beard, wild and unkempt. His eyes narrowed the second he saw Lixa. "She's not from any species I've ever studied," he said instead of "hello, nice to see you too." Arthur grunted. They went inside. Mason's house was more bunker than home. Books on alien civilizations, surveillance monitors, half-disassembled drones, and old war memorabilia cluttered every surface. Lixa stuck close to Arthur, her eyes darting between strange tech and blinking lights. Mason leaned against the table. "You're not going to like what I tell you. I never do." He turned on an old holoscreen and brought up a classified logo, a government black site called Project Ian. 6 months ago, Mason said, an unauthorized extraterrestrial ship crash-landed off the coast of Greenland. The official story was a meteor, but insiders say the ship carried over a dozen non-human life forms, juveniles. Arthur went cold. What happened to them? They were processed. Mason gave him a look. Studied, some were disposed of, a few were kept, one escaped. Guess who? Arthur looked at Lixa. She looked down. She wasn't supposed to survive, Mason continued. She probably doesn't even know what she is. Ian used tech from the Saturn wreck to modify alien physiology, force evolution, genetic overlays, Enough, Arthur growled. She's just a child. No, Mason said. She's a key. He pulled up a new image, a glowing glyph, circular, with lines resembling a star map. Lixa stepped forward, her eyes widened. That, she whispered. I've seen that where? Mason demanded. In dream, in light. Mason muttered a curse. That's not just some alien logo. That's a stellar coordinate sequence. Not of any known system. Arthur stared. You're saying she's not from this galaxy. She's not from any charted space. Which means whoever made her or made her escape had help from something older. Arthur turned to Lixa. Do you remember anything else? She hesitated. Then, there was light. Pain. I woke inside metal walls. Cold. Then, fire. Screams. I ran. Arthur swallowed. You were inside that crash. She nodded. They hunted me, she said. They wore your faces. But they were empty. Mason looked grim. That matches reports from Deep Ian leaks. They had infiltrator units, black suits, AI shells. No souls, just orders. Arthur clenched his fists. And now they want her back. No, Mason said. Now they want to erase her. She's a threat. Proof. She breaks the story they're selling. They'll kill her. And anyone who helps. Arthur stood. Then we leave. We go off-grid. Mason blocked him. You think you're the only one watching her? Look out the window. Arthur moved to the curtain and pulled it back. A drone hovered in the distance, small, silent, but unmistakably. Government, they found us. They didn't waste time. Mason handed Arthur an old disruptor pistol. Lapawa pre-war tech. Barely legal. He gave Lixa a silver pendant to wear. A signal jammer disguised as jewelry. They ran, back into the storm. Into the wild. Mason stayed behind. Someone had to burn the trail. Arthur and Lixa drove through the back routes until the roads ended and dirt took over. They found a safe house deep in the woods, an abandoned power station from the solar boom era, long forgotten, still functional. There, Lixa finally asked, Why are you helping me? Arthur lit a candle. Because no one helped my daughter. She looked at him, quiet. What happened? He took a breath. She worked on Mars, one of the mines. Something collapsed. They said it was an accident, but the reports didn't match. Records vanished. I pushed too hard. They told me to shut up. I did. You lost her. I let them take her. Lixa walked over and placed the small, glowing hand on his chest. Then we are the same. Over the next 2 days, Lixa's abilities began to surface. When she cried, the walls vibrated. When she dreamed, the lights flickered. She healed a scratch on Arthur's hand with a touch, but afterward, she collapsed, unconscious for hours. She wasn't built for Earth, but she was adapting, fast. Arthur kept a journal, recorded her words, her drawings. She kept sketching the same shape, the coordinate glyph, in different variations. Some rotated, some inverted. He noticed something strange. The glyph was changing, like it was counting down. One night, while Lixa slept, Arthur stepped outside for fresh air. That's when he saw the man, standing in the tree line. Black coat, blank face, no expression. Arthur raised the disruptor. Don't move. The figure tilted its head, then its face, folded like metal rearranging. Beneath, nothing, just light. Arthur fired. The blast hit. The thing shimmered, then vanished like smoke. Lixa rushed out behind him, breathing fast. They found us. They packed again. Running. Always running. As they crossed a railway yard the next morning, Arthur spotted a manhole cover marked with a symbol, the same glyph Lixa kept drawing, only older, carved into the steel, not painted. He pulled it open. Beneath was a tunnel, ancient, cold, lined with symbols. Lixa said nothing, just climbed down first. Arthur followed. And the moment they both touched ground, the tunnel lit up. Blue light danced across the walls. Symbols activated. The air changed. Lixa looked back at him. Her eyes were brighter than ever. And she whispered, They didn't build this place. The truth buried under Earth. The tunnel was old. Older than the city above it. Older than human civilization. If Lixa was right, Arthur followed the faint blue glow pulsing ahead of him, cast by symbols on the walls, not written, but grown into the stone itself. Like the rock had been convinced to become language. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel changed. Stone gave way to something else. Something smoother, organic, yet artificial. The walls pulsed faintly like a sleeping heartbeat. Arthur whispered, What is this place? Lixa placed a hand on the glowing wall. Her fingers trembled. This isn't human, but it isn't mine either. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Then whose is it? She looked up at him. Her violet eyes shimmered. Yours. They walked in silence. For almost an hour, the path sloping downward as if into the Earth's memory. There were no signs of decay, no rats, no dust. The symbols changed. To the farther in they went, the more familiar they became to Lixa. She touched one set and flinched like it shocked her. Arthur steadied her. "You all right?" She nodded. Dazed, it spoke. Spoke. What did it say? She hesitated. Then, slowly, "You were never alone." They finally reached a chamber. Vast, circular, lit by a dome of swirling blue light above them. It felt like standing inside a giant eye. In the center stood a platform, surrounded by floating shards of dark crystal, spinning silently in midair. Lixa stepped forward, and the shards rearranged themselves, forming a three-dimensional map. Stars, systems, galaxies, and at the center, Earth. Arthur gasped. This is some kind of archive." Lixa's voice was soft. "A memory." She stepped onto the platform. The crystals glowed, reacting to her presence. Suddenly, the map zoomed in straight to a smaller system, one Arthur didn't recognize. A planet there pulsed with the same light as Lixa's hands. "This is where I was made," she said. "Not born, made." Arthur didn't know what to say. The sadness in her voice wasn't just pain. It was emptiness, like she'd never known. "The warmth of being wanted," Lixa continued. "I was designed for connection, to find something lost. I think it's here." "You mean Earth?" She shook her head. "I mean you." A low hum rose in the chamber. The floating crystals began spinning faster. One drifted toward Arthur and hovered in front of his face. He stared into it. His knees nearly buckled. Inside the shard, images flashing, moving, not dreams, memories of Earth, but not Earth as he knew it. Cities underground, humans with glowing eyes, machines grown from plants, and above them all a colossal tower piercing the sky, topped with a living light. He saw himself standing beside it. Not exactly him, but a man who looked like him, younger, taller, wearing something like armor, but woven like cloth, holding a child in his arms with silver hair and violet eyes. He staggered back. "What the hell?" Lixa caught him before he fell. "You're a key," she said. "I don't know how, but you're connected." Arthur's head spun. This can't be right." The room began to shake. Symbols on the wall flared. Lixa grabbed his hand. "Someone's coming." They ran back the way they came, but the path had changed. Now the tunnel forked, split into multiple passages. Arthur cursed. "Which way did we come from?" Lixa closed her eyes. Her hands glowed faintly. "This way." They turned left. But as they ran, a sound echoed behind them. Not footsteps, not voices. A signal, high-pitched, artificial, slicing through the air like a knife. Arthur spun around and fired the disruptor. The tunnel lit up with a bright pulse, and for a split second he saw it. A drone, sleek, insect-like, floating silently. Its lens glowed. Red dot. He fired again. Hit it. Sparks flew, but more were coming. They reached the surface through a hatch in the woods, miles from where they'd entered. It was dawn, cold and quiet. Arthur collapsed to the ground, panting. Lixa sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees. "Those drones?" Arthur said. "Ian, no," Lixa whispered. "Worse." Arthur stared at her. "Worse than a secret government kill squad." "They're not from Earth," she said. "Not anymore." Arthur's skin crawled. "You mean they're aliens?" She shook her head. "No, they were human, a long time ago, but they changed how she looked up. They served something hungry. They took shelter in an abandoned ranger station." Arthur patched up a scrape on his arm. Lixa sat silently, staring at the stars through a broken window. "You said that place wasn't made by your people," Arthur said, "but it reacted to you. Because we were made from their remnants," Lixa replied. "Their biology, their designs, but not their purpose." Arthur rubbed his temples. "And me. That shard, it showed me things, versions of this planet I've never seen. Because you carry memory, deep in your code." Arthur blinked. "Code? I'm not a machine." "No," Lixa said. "But you're not untouched. They marked you, long ago." Arthur leaned forward. "Who are they?" Lixa looked at him. "The architects." According to her, the architects were an ancient race that seeded hundreds of planets with life millions of years ago. They didn't conquer, they shaped. They left behind memory vaults like the one under Earth, part archive, part test. "Test for what?" Arthur asked. "To see if any world would become more." Arthur laughed bitterly. "So we're part of some alien science project?" "No," Lixa said. You were the first. Arthur froze. You were the control sample, she said. Humanity was the only species left untouched. Natural evolution, uninterfered. But even then, something woke. Arthur sat in silence, his thoughts racing. And you were sent to find us. Lixa nodded. I was created to search for the signal. The oldest one. It comes from Earth. Arthur blinked. Signal? She reached into her hoodie and pulled out the pendant Mason gave her. It was glowing. The signal jammer had failed. Just then, every light in the station flickered. Outside, a low worry hum. Arthur looked out the window. A ship was descending through the clouds. Silent, black, shaped like a spear. No markings. They found us, Lixa whispered. Arthur grabbed her hand. Go now. They bolted through the back exit, down a muddy trail toward the forest. Behind them, the ship landed. And figures emerged, tall, metallic, wearing human faces stretched like masks. One of them spoke, voice distorted, robotic. Subject 9, identified. Return is mandatory. Arthur raised the disruptor. Don't move. The figure tilted its head, thumped its face, folded like metal rearranging beneath. Nothing, just light. Arthur fired. The blast hit. The thing shimmered, then vanished like smoke. Lixa rushed out behind him, breathing fast. They found us. They packed again. Running. Always running. As they crossed a railway yard the next morning, Arthur spotted a manhole cover marked with a symbol, the same glyph Lixa kept drawing, only older, carved into the steel, not painted. He pulled it open. Beneath was a tunnel, ancient, cold, lined with symbols. Lixa said nothing, just climbed down first. Arthur followed, and the moment they both touched ground, the tunnel lit up. Blue light danced across the walls, symbols activated. The air changed. Lixa looked back at him. Her eyes were brighter than ever, and she whispered, they didn't build this place. The truth buried under earth. The tunnel was old. Older than the city above it, older than human civilization. If Lixa was right, Arthur followed the faint blue glow pulsing ahead of him, cast by symbols on the walls, not written, but grown into the stone itself, like the rock had been convinced to become language. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel changed. Stone gave way to something else, something smoother, organic, yet artificial. The walls pulsed faintly like a sleeping heartbeat. Arthur whispered, what is this place? Lixa placed a hand on the glowing wall. Her fingers trembled. This isn't human, but it isn't mine either. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Then whose is it? She looked up at him. Her violet eyes shimmered. Yours. They walked in silence. For almost an hour, the path sloping downward as if into the earth's memory. There were no signs of decay, no rats, no dust. The symbols changed. To the farther in they went, the more familiar they became to Lixa. She touched one set and flinched like it shocked her. Arthur steadied her. You, all right? She nodded, dazed. It spoke. Spoke. What did it say? She hesitated. Then, slowly, you were never alone. They finally reached a chamber. Vast, circular, lit by a dome of swirling blue light above them. It felt like standing inside a giant eye. In the center stood a platform, surrounded by floating shards of dark crystal, spinning silently in midair. Lixa stepped forward, and the shards rearranged themselves, forming a three-dimensional map. Stars, systems, galaxies, and at the center, Earth. Arthur gasped. This is some kind of archive. Lixa's voice was soft. A memory. She stepped onto the platform. The crystals glowed, reacting to her presence. Suddenly, the map zoomed in straight to a smaller system, one Arthur didn't recognize. A planet there pulsed with the same light as Lixa's hands. This is where I was made, she said. Not born, made. Arthur didn't know what to say. The sadness in her voice wasn't just pain. It was emptiness, like she'd never known. The warmth of being wanted. Lixa continued. I was designed for connection, to find something lost. I think it's here. You mean Earth? She shook her head. I mean, you. A low hum rose in the chamber. The floating crystals began spinning faster. One drifted toward Arthur and hovered in front of his face. He stared into it, his knees nearly buckled. Inside, the shard images, flashing, moving, not dreams, memories of Earth, but not Earth as he knew it. Cities underground, humans with glowing eyes, machines grown from plants, and above them all, a colossal tower piercing the sky, topped with a living light. He saw himself standing beside it, not exactly him, but a man who looked like him, younger, taller, wearing something like armor, but woven like cloth, holding a child in his arms with silver hair and violet eyes. He staggered back. What the hell? Lixa caught him before he fell. You're a key, she said. I don't know how, but you're connected. Arthur's head spun. This can't be right. The room began to shake. Symbols on the wall flared. Lixa grabbed his hand. Someone's coming. They ran, back the way they came. But the path had changed. Now the tunnel forked, split into multiple passages. Arthur cursed. Which way did we come from? Lixa closed her eyes. Her hands glowed faintly. This way. They turned left. But as they ran, a sound echoed behind them. Not footsteps. Not voices. A signal, high-pitched, artificial, slicing through the air like a knife. Arthur spun around and fired the disruptor. The tunnel lit up with a bright pulse, and for a split second he saw it. A drone, sleek, insect-like, floating silently. Its lens glowed. Red dot. He fired again. Hit it. Sparks flew, but more were coming. They reached the surface through a hatch in the woods, miles from where they'd entered. It was dawn, cold and quiet. Arthur collapsed to the ground, panting. Lixa sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees. Those drones, Arthur said. Ian? No, Lixa whispered. Worse. Arthur stared at her. Worse than a secret government kill squad. They're not from Earth, she said. Not anymore. Arthur's skin crawled. You mean they're aliens? She shook her head. No. They were human, a long time ago, but they changed. How she looked up. They served something hungry. They took shelter in an abandoned ranger station. Arthur patched up a scrape on his arm. Lixa sat silently, staring at the stars through a broken window. You said that place wasn't made by your people, Arthur said. But it reacted to you. Because we were made from their remnants, Lixa replied. Their biology, their designs, but not their purpose. Arthur rubbed his temples. And me. That shard, it showed me things. Versions of this planet I've never seen. Because you carry memory, deep in your code. Arthur blinked. Code. I'm not a machine. No, Lixa said. But you're not. Untouched. They marked you. Long ago. Arthur leaned forward. Who are they? Lixa looked at him. The architects, according to her. The architects were an ancient race that seeded hundreds of planets with life millions of years ago. They didn't conquer. They shaped. They left behind memory vaults like the one under Earth, part archive, part test. Test for what? Arthur asked. To see if any world would become more. Arthur laughed bitterly. So we're part of some alien science project? No, Lixa said. You were the first. Arthur froze. You were the control sample, she said. Humanity was the only species left untouched. Natural evolution. Uninterfered. But even then, something woke. Arthur sat in silence, his thoughts racing. And you were sent to find us. Lixa nodded. I was created to search for the signal, the oldest one. It comes from Earth. Arthur blinked. Signal. She reached into her hoodie and pulled out the pendant Mason gave her. It was glowing. The signal jammer had failed. Just then, every light in the station flickered. Outside, a low worry hum. Arthur looked out the window. A ship was descending through the clouds, silent, black, shaped like a spear. No markings. They found us, Lixa whispered. Arthur grabbed her hand. Go. Now. They bolted through the back exit, down a muddy trail toward the forest, behind them. The ship landed. And figures emerged, tall, metallic, wearing human faces stretched like masks. One of them spoke, voice distorted. Robotic. Subject 9, identified. Return is mandatory. Arthur raised his disruptor and fired. It did nothing. The figure stepped forward, arms unfolding like blades. Lixa stepped between them, and then her body ignited with light. Violet, blinding. The air cracked. The forest shook. The figure stumbled back, its synthetic skin burning. Off, underneath, wires. Screaming code. Arthur pulled Lixa away. Come on, don't stop. They ran, again. But Arthur knew something had changed. Lixa wasn't just some alien runaway. She was a weapon. One she didn't understand. One someone, or something, wanted to retrieve. Or destroy. Later, as they camped by a riverbank, Lixa sat beside the fire. Silent. Arthur handed her a piece of bread. She didn't eat. I saw what I did, she whispered. I felt it. You saved us. No, she said. I broke something. Arthur watched her. What do you mean? My design was regulated, suppressed. That blast, it wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. And now? Arthur leaned in. Now what? She looked at him. her voice trembling. I think I've started the signal. Run from the light. The forest was quiet in the worst way possible. No birds, no wind, no sounds of insects, just silence. Arthur Langley crouched behind a rotting log, his breath coming in short gasps. Beside him, Lixa sat perfectly still, her eyes closed, glowing faintly beneath the surface of her skin. They had been running for hours. The black ship hadn't followed them directly. It didn't have to. The things inside it, the altered ones, moved in silence, like shadows in human form. And Lix's light had made them angry. That much was clear. Arthur checked the disruptor half-charge. Maybe 1 or 2 good shots, left, useless, against the kind of monsters they were facing. Not unless he got lucky. He looked at the girl beside him. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a scared child doing her best to survive in a world that didn't want her. Yet, the moment she had let go, when her body flared with pure energy, something ancient and terrifying had awakened. He had seen it in her eyes, that spark, that knowledge, that danger. They spent the night moving cautiously through the wilderness. Arthur knew the terrain. These were old trails from his younger years, before the Martian mining job, before the war, before he got old and tired and angry at everything. By dawn, they found a cave near the edge of a forgotten ridge, cold but dry. Arthur started a small fire with flint, knowing the smoke might give them away. But the girl was shaking, and warmth came first. Lixa sat near the flames, hugging her knees. You okay? Arthur asked. I don't know, she whispered. Everything is loud inside me now. Arthur sat beside her, trying to stretch out his bad knee. You saved us, that matters. She looked at him. I didn't mean to. It was just fear. You think humans do things for better reasons. She cracked a small smile. You're not like others I used to be. Then the world kicked the softness out of me. Lixa stared into the fire. You didn't run when you saw me. I'd already lost 1 daughter, Arthur said. Couldn't lose another. Her eyes glistened. You call me daughter? He shrugged. If you want. She leaned into his side. He didn't move away. The next day, they reached an abandoned observatory, an old, dome-shaped facility on top of a rocky slope. It had been closed for years, ever since AI satellites replaced manual telescopes. To Arthur's surprise, the place still had power. They took shelter inside. He bolted the doors, reinforced the windows, and tried to bring the terminal back online. It took time, but eventually the system flickered to life, blue light dancing across ancient hardware. Lixa walked to the center of the dome and looked up through the broken skylight. The stars were still visible, faint but present, in the pale daylight. I remember this, she said softly. Arthur turned from the terminal. Earth's sky. She shook her head. No, this alignment, these stars, they're wrong now. But once, they looked like this. Arthur narrowed his eyes. How long ago? Lixa didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand, and the system sparked. Screens shifted. Maps changed. A new interface opened, one that was not human in design. Arthur stepped back. You sure that's safe? No, she said, but it's what we need. The observatory's old antennae could still reach satellites. Using Lix's bioenergy and the terminal, they hijacked a hidden frequency. Together, they sent a signal, a coded pulse, not to governments, not to Eon, but into space, into deep space. Lix's hands glowed as she spoke into the system. Her voice a mixture of frequencies and tones Arthur couldn't understand. Her body trembled. Her eyes lit like twin stars. Then silence. Arthur stepped forward. What did you just do? I sent them my heart, she said. He stared. What? My species, my makers, my people, if they still exist. I sent a signal. If they hear me, they'll come. Arthur looked at her, torn between hope and horror. Will they help? He asked. She hesitated. I don't know. That night, Arthur had a dream. He stood in a desert, not Earth's, a place with 2 suns, both bleeding orange light. Mountains floated in the air like islands. The sky was cracked, like glass. And from the cracks, something looked back at him. A being made of light and code. Not physical, not real, but vast. It said nothing, but Arthur understood. You are the last echo. It whispered in his bones. He woke in a sweat. Lixa was gone. Panic punched him in the chest. He grabbed the disruptor and limped through the dome, calling her name. No answer. He found her outside, barefoot in the grass, staring at the sky. She turned slowly. They're close, she said. I feel them. Arthur followed her gaze. High above, hidden among the clouds, a massive shape hovered, not the black spear ship from before. This one was alive, organic, like a whale made of starlight and machinery, barely visible. A ripple in the atmosphere. Arthur's mouth went dry. Is that them? No, she said. Not mine. Not yours either. He stared. Then what is it? Lixa whispered. Something old. Something lost. It heard the signal. The ship didn't move, but Arthur knew it, saw them, that night. Everything changed. The observatory was attacked. It started with static in the air, then lights failing, then a scream, not human, not animal, a warning. Arthur grabbed Lixa. We're leaving now. They bolted for the back exit, but it was too late. Figures dropped through the ceiling. Not drones, not soldiers. These were twisted. Their bodies were part flesh, part metal, stitched with alien symbols. Their mouths didn't move. They broadcasted thoughts directly into Arthur's skull. You are obsolete. You broke containment. Return the prototype. Arthur raised the disruptor and fired. One fell. Two kept coming. Lixa stood in the center of the room, shaking. No, she whispered. Not again. Her body ignited. Not in fire. In data. Light turned to shape. Her skin vanished, replaced by pure energy. Her eyes were white. Arthur shielded his face as the dome exploded. The attackers burned in seconds, erased by a blast. So powerful, the walls buckled. When it ended, Lixa collapsed. Arthur caught her mid-fall. She was unconscious, her form flickering like a signal on the edge of fading. He carried her from the rubble. They escaped into the woods again. But she didn't wake for hours. When she did, her voice was weak. I can't hold it in anymore, she whispered. Arthur sat beside her, his face hollow. You're losing control. It's too much. I wasn't ready. They released something inside me when I used the signal. Arthur clenched his jaw. They did it on purpose. They made you a beacon. She nodded. And I think you're the one I was supposed to find. Why me? Because you're not like the others. You resisted. Arthur looked at the stars above. I didn't save the world. You saved me. As they rested in a forgotten train tunnel, Arthur made a decision. No more running. No more hiding. They needed answers. Real ones, not just from Lix's fragmented memories. They needed to go where it all began. He remembered Mason's earlier words about the glyphs match in an unexplainable cave system in Australia. Symbols thousands of years old, way before human civilization. Arthur opened the map. It was time to go. But as he planned their route, Lixa stirred. She gripped his hand. Her eyes wide. They're already there. Arthur frowned. Her voice cracked. The ones who made the others. The signal the plane touched down on scorched ground. Arthur Langley stepped out, dust stinging his eyes. The heat in the Australian outback hit like a wall, dry, unforgiving, endless. Behind him, Lixa shaded her glowing eyes, her breath slightly unsteady in Earth's brutal sunlight. They had landed far from any city. No authorities, no airports, just a dirt airstrip used by black market traders and survivalists. The ride from the train tunnel to the airstrip had been tense, every moment filled with fear that another drone or twisted hunter would drop from the sky. But they'd made it. Now came the harder part. Arthur checked the coordinates. Mason had left in a voice message before going dark. There were no roads, just red desert and ancient rock formations that rose from the ground like sleeping giants. There, Lixa said softly, pointing. Arthur followed her gaze. A cluster of jagged stones stood in the distance, blackened with age, half swallowed by sand. But above the tallest one, he could just barely make out a faint shimmer. A ripple in the air. A field. Cloaked. Double quotes. Think that's the place? Arthur asked. Lixa nodded. I feel it. It took them 2 hours on foot to reach the site. Lixa moved slower now. Each step seemed heavier, like the energy inside her was burning hotter by the day. You need to rest, Arthur said as they reached the stones. She shook her head. No time. They're closing in. The moment they crossed the invisible threshold of the shimmer, a deep hum resonated through the ground. The air shifted. The temperature dropped slightly, and then the sand parted. Arthur froze. Beneath them, stairs revealed themselves, spiraling down into pitch darkness, carved from something not quite stone, more like metal fused with bone. He pulled out his flashlight. Lixa didn't need one. Her body pulsed gently in the dark. Together, they descended. The stairs led to a vast chamber, but it wasn't a cave, it was a temple. The walls were covered in inscriptions, not written but projected patterns, danced in the air like coded fire. Glyphs that matched Lix's memories, the same language as the deep vault they had found weeks ago. Except this time, the glyphs responded to Arthur. Every step he took, they changed color. Lines moved, rearranged. Lixa stared in shock. "It's you." Arthur reached out to touch one of the glowing symbols. And suddenly, the chamber lit up. A beam of light shot from the ceiling to the floor, and the space around them twisted, not painfully but like slipping into water that remembered them. Then the voice came. It wasn't a sound, it was inside their heads. Identity confirmed. Arthur Langley. Genetic anchor verified. Protocol resume. Signal _001. Arthur stumbled. "What the hell is happening?" Lixa whispered. "You're not just marked, you're one of them." The light grew brighter. Images formed in the beam, holograms of Earth, stars, alien structures. The voice continued. "Signal received. Countdown initiated. Synchronization begins in T-72 hours. Arthur's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" Lixa stepped closer to the beam. The images responded. She raised her hand. "It's not a weapon. It's a return code." Arthur narrowed his eyes. Return. The architects, they left beacons. If any seeded world sent the right signal, it would trigger a return, not of them but of what they became. Arthur stared. "And you sent that signal?" She nodded. "I didn't know what it would do." The beam pulsed again. Heuristic match. Success. Phase 1 complete. Anchor ready. Anchor ready. Anchor. Arthur repeated, "I'm not anchoring anything." But the system ignored him. The walls glowed with increasing intensity. The chamber shook. Lixa backed away. "We need to leave now." They burst out into the desert just as the sky cracked open. A thunderous roar echoed across the sands. Not weather, not thunder, but engines. Above them. The Twisted had arrived. 3 ships, black, silent, sharper than any natural shape. From them, figures descended, tall, humanoid, wrapped in cloaks that rippled like smoke. Their faces were blank mirrors, and as they touched the ground, the earth beneath their feet curled. Lixa grabbed Arthur's hand. "We have to run." He didn't move. He looked up at the ships. Then at her. "We can't run forever. You'll die. I already did, when I let them take my daughter." Lixa's voice broke. "I'm not her." Arthur's eyes softened. "No, but you matter just as much." He raised his disruptor and took aim. The first blast didn't even slow them. The second grazed one, which responded by sending a wave of kinetic force that shattered the rocks beside them. Lixa stepped forward. "No," she said. "Let me try." Arthur wanted to scream no, but something in her voice stopped him. She raised both hands, palms out, glowing bright. The creatures paused. For the first time, they spoke aloud. "Protocol breach. Terminate anomaly." Lixa closed her eyes and became light, not fire, not plasma, but raw, ancient memory. The desert trembled. The sky turned purple, and from the ground beneath her, the ancient glyphs burned through the sand, connecting like veins. The Twisted charged and vanished, gone, evaporated, disintegrated. Their ships, gone. To Arthur shielded his face, struggling to stay upright. When the light faded, Lixa collapsed in his arms. She was shaking, pale, fading. "You used too much," he whispered. She nodded weakly. "I stopped them, but not the signal." Arthur looked at the horizon. And saw it in the distance. A tear in the sky. Like a hole cut into reality. And through it, something was coming. They returned to the temple chamber, seeking answers. Lixa barely walked on her own, leaning on Arthur for support. Inside, the system still glowed. Arthur stepped into the beam again. This time, it asked him a question. "Initiate full return sequence." He hesitated. Lixa whispered, "It's your choice. Only you can say yes." "Why me?" "Because Earth chose you. You're its echo, its memory. You're what's left of the first pattern." Arthur stared into the light. He thought about his life. The wars, the mistakes, the daughter he couldn't save, the people who never listened, the world that moved on without meaning. And now this, a chance to bring something back. Not domination, not gods, but truth. He took a deep breath and said, "Yes." The system exploded into motion. Glyphs spun, symbols burned. The countdown resumed. 72 hours until synchronization. Arthur didn't know what that meant, but he knew this. They had to get the world ready, or the world would burn. As they exited the temple once more, Lixa collapsed. Arthur caught her. Her skin flickered. Her body was barely holding shape. "You're dying," he said. "I was never meant to last this long," she whispered. "No," Arthur growled. "No, you don't get to leave. I'm just the spark. Arthur, you're the flame." He held her tight. "We find a way. We survive. That's what humans do." Her eyes opened, glowing faintly. "Then, let's make it count." The return 72 hours. That was all the time they had left before. Synchronization. Before the signal Arthur had unknowingly activated would bring something back, not from space, but from time, from memory, from the very code of Earth itself. And Lixa, she was fading faster than either of them could admit. They had returned to a deserted research station hidden near the Blue Mountains. It had been used during the AI uprisings, decades ago now. It was silent, off-grid, buried in dust and long-forgotten satellite panels. Arthur had barricaded the doors, recharged the emergency power cores, and watched helplessly as the girl who had changed his life lay curled in an old cot, breathing light instead of air. She was glowing from within. Too much power, too much signal. Her body was never designed to handle it all. He sat beside her, clutching her cold fingers. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered. "Not until this is over." She smiled faintly. "You always say that, and I mean it every time." By the second night, the sky wasn't the same anymore. Clouds moved like they were alive. The stars didn't blink, they burned. Around the world, strange things were happening. Seismographs trembled without earthquakes. The oceans pulsed with tides unconnected to the moon. People across continents dreamed of voices of towers in the sky, cities underground, and glowing children. And somewhere, in low orbit, a massive structure phased into view for the first time in millennia. Not a ship, not a satellite, a relay, one built before human memory. Lixa, weak but alert, saw the feed on the station's cracked monitor. "That's the Ark," she whispered. Arthur blinked. Ark. It was built by the architects. A failsafe, a memory vault. It stores not just knowledge but life, patterns, DNA, culture, billions of years. Why is it here? Because we called it back. Arthur stood outside the bunker as the sky tore open. The rift that had been expanding above the Earth's magnetic poles, now glowed with spiral light, like a storm made of stars. And through it, something stepped. Not a ship, not a being, but a code, the very language of life. It rained down through the clouds like silent snow, not ice, not dust, but shimmering fragments of memory, old blueprints from a forgotten universe. Arthur dropped to one knee, overwhelmed. He felt everything. The birth of galaxies, the rise and fall of species, planets that lived and died like beating hearts. He saw Earth's true history, not one of random evolution, but of carefully planted growth, of humanity as the exception, not the rule, unmodified, untouched. The control species. You were the variable they never solved, came Lixa's voice from behind him. He turned. She was standing barely, but her glow had changed, softer, more stable, like the code had finally synced with her body. "They're not coming to conquer," she said. "They're coming to complete." Arthur stared up at the shimmering sky. "Complete what?" She reached for his hand. "You back inside." The countdown reached its final hour, all over Earth. Those who were marked people with ancient bloodlines, hidden architect code, or deep ancestral memory, began to change. Not physically, but in perception that they understood things they never could before. Mathematics felt like music, language folded into light. Time bent into memory. The world wasn't ending. It was awakening. Then, just before the countdown hit 0, the world stopped. Literally. Not a sound, no motion. Time froze. Except for Arthur. And Lixa. And one more presence. In the room, it stepped out of the beam of light, like it had always been there. Tall, not male, not female, skin like stars, eyes like mirrors. Its body didn't shimmer, reality shimmered around it. "Arthur Langley," it said in 1,000 voices, "you are the echo, the last variable, the soul of Earth." Arthur clenched his jaw. "If you've come to wipe us out, I've got a half-charged blaster and bad knees." Lixa stepped forward. "He's not a threat." The being looked at her. "She is correct. This is not conquest." Arthur raised his chin. "Then what is it?" The being stepped closer. Its eyes reflected Arthur's entire life, his pain, his failures, his regrets, and his love. This is the moment where a species chooses its future. Arthur was taken, not abducted, just transported, pulled into a memory too large for any one man. He stood at the edge of space, staring at Earth. Beside him were millions, human figures made of light, old and young, all watching the same thing. The Earth began to change, not physically, but energetically. The veil lifted. Cities of light, long buried beneath ice sheets, pulsed awake. Hidden relics from the age before the flood, before even summer, before the stories rose from oceans and deserts. The Earth remembered, and it showed the people what they were meant to become. Not gods, but keepers. Not conquerors. Harmonizers. A bridge between the chaos of galaxies and the balance of creation. Arthur woke in the research station. Lixa stood beside him. The light was gone from her body, but she was smiling. "You did it," she said. "No," he whispered. "We did." Outside, the sky was still glowing, but now in golds and blues, not fire. The rift had closed. The arc had merged with the upper atmosphere, invisible to the world unless you knew where to look. Earth had become a node, a beacon, a memory, but more than anything, it had become home again. They left the research station after one more night. No one chased them anymore. The twisted were gone. The black ships had vanished. Ian shut down quietly, their leaders retiring overnight. The world didn't know exactly what had happened, only that it had changed. People were kinder, dreams were brighter, children began drawing symbols no one had taught them, and when storms came, they didn't destroy. They cleaned. Nature, once wounded, began to heal. In fast forward, months later, Arthur and Lixa lived quietly in a small town near the coast. He worked as a mechanic, again, not for money, but because he liked fixing things. Lixa went to school, a small place that didn't ask where she came from, only who she wanted to be. And every night, she looked at the stars and whispered something in a language older than time. Sometimes, they whispered back. Final scene. Arthur sat by the fire one evening, watching her sketch in the sand, the same symbol she had drawn so many times, the one that started it all. He smiled, still remembering. She looked up, still learning. Then she added something new to the symbol, a small circle inside the center. "What's that?" Arthur asked. She smiled softly. "You." The lesson: this wasn't a story about a chosen one saving the world. This was a story about a world saving itself, because one old man decided not to walk away, because he said, "This child matters," because he cared. And in that act of care, humanity remembered what it was meant to be, not perfect, not dominant, but compassionate, and ready for the return, for the future, for everything waiting in the stars. The end.